Amid countless worlds that seem like pure fiction, lie battles, sacrifices, and secrets that have never been told. Every story is a war between destiny and choice. If you're ready to uncover heroes, villains, and the forgotten souls lost in between, then step into the world of Comic Recap, where every tale is a battle for survival.
Unlike typical adversaries who might target individual souls, Alduin's soul-consuming actions disrupted the core of Nordic afterlife beliefs. By consuming souls already residing in Svengard, Alduin undermined the sacred promise of eternal recognition that had been a cornerstone of Nordic burial practices for millennia. His method of consuming souls implies unsettling truths about the Nordic afterlife rather than simply destroying souls. Alduin seemed to absorb their essence, adding their strength to his own. This suggests that, even in Svengard, souls maintain distinct metaphysical qualities that can be harvested or manipulated. More troublingly, it hints that entry into Svengard doesn't guarantee true immortality, but rather a conditional form of spiritual endurance, vulnerable to powerful entities. Alduin's myth within Svengard served both practical and symbolic purposes in his soul harvesting activities. Practically, it confused souls, preventing them from reaching the Hall of Valor. Symbolically, it corrupted the natural mists that separated worlds, turning a navigational challenge into an existential trap. This distortion of metaphysical boundaries highlights Alduin's role as a force of cosmic upheaval, not just a potent enemy. The impact of Alduin's actions on the cyclical nature of the Kalpas, the great world cycles in Nordic cosmology, is significant. Traditionally, it was believed that Alduin devoured the world at the end of each Kalpa, paving the way for the next. However, his consumption of souls in Svengard suggests a more intricate process, where the energy of heroic souls might act as a catalyst for this world-ending function. This connection between personal afterlife and cosmic cycles unveils a deeper integration of individual and universal fate than was previously understood in Nordic theology. Culturally, Alduin's incursion into Svengard shook Nordic communities during the Fourth Era, with burial traditions already in decline due to imperial influence. Families questioned whether their ancestors had truly attained eternal reward, or if they had been consumed by the World Eater. Some communities responded by modifying burial rites, incorporating protective measures like enchanted grave goods, soul-binding rituals, or special symbols alongside traditional motifs. The relationship between Svengard and other afterlife realms remains incomplete, but evidence suggests that Svengard primarily accepts Nordic souls, with worthiness rather than ethnicity determining eligibility. Non-Nordic individuals who die courageously while embracing Nordic values appear capable of entering Svengard, suggesting a metaphysical system based on spiritual alignment rather than rigid ethnic boundaries. This inclusivity reflects the Nordic tradition of adopting outsiders through demonstrated courage and loyalty, both in life and after death. This principle is seen in the non-Nordic names found in some of the earliest skaldic poems describing the inhabitants of the Hall of Valor. The physical structure of the Hall of Valor mirrors Nordic burial practices. The central hearth in the hall resembles fire pits found in Nordic tombs, where ceremonial fires were lit during funerals. Long feasting tables in Svengard are echoed by offering tables in family crypts, where food and drink were left for the dead. Even the weapons displayed on Svengard's walls correspond to those placed with warriors during burial. These architectural similarities served spiritual purposes by surrounding the deceased with representations of Svengard, helping the soul's transition. The more elaborate the tomb, the closer it resembled Svengard's features, possibly explaining why high-status individuals received more intricate burial arrangements, essentially providing their souls with a more accurate map to the afterlife. Svengard's soundscape further enriches Nordic afterlife beliefs. Accounts describe overlapping layers of sound battle chants, heroic poems, feasting songs, and the clash of weapons in friendly combat. This perpetual sound environment contrasts with the usual silence of death, establishing a realm defined by vibrant expression rather than stillness. This emphasis on sound aligns with the Nordic tradition of oral history and skaldic poetry, suggesting that stories themselves are key to immortality. The experience of time in Svengard differs from mortal time. While events generally proceed forward, the boundaries between eras are permeable, allowing heroes from different ages to interact freely. This non-linear time structure explains why some Nordic texts describe historical figures receiving guidance from ancestors who had already experienced Svengard's revelations. This fluidity of time facilitates a two-way flow of wisdom between the living and the dead, preventing the loss of knowledge across generations. The certainty of a desirable afterlife for those who die honorably shaped Nordic culture, encouraging warriors to take extraordinary risks. This belief system contributed to the fearsome reputation of Nordic fighters throughout history. The cosmic significance of Svengard within the broader framework of Celtic cycles suggests that the Nordic afterlife serves more than just to reward individual valor. The accumulation of heroic souls within the Hall of Valor forms a reservoir of martial power, which, according to some esoteric texts, will be used in the final battle at the end of the world. In this eschatological view, each soul admitted to Svengard strengthens the forces that will fight alongside the gods against cosmic enemies, including Alduin. This connection between personal afterlife and universal fate underscores a theological framework where individual choices have cosmic consequences. A warrior who dies honorably not only secures their own immortality, but also contributes to the ultimate preservation of creation. Deep within the shifting corridors of Apocrypha, beyond the endless stacks of books and scrolls, is a section few mortals have seen. Here, ancient tomes bound in scales instead of leather float in the air, their pages inscribed with substances that shimmer and move. This is the dragon section of Hermes Mora's infinite library, containing knowledge so dangerous that even the Daedric Prince of Fate keeps it separate from his other treasures. The existence of this collection was first documented by an ill-fated expedition from the College of Winterhold in the late Third Era, led by Master Wizard Deneth Varys. Only Varys returned, his mind shattered by what he had seen. Before his death, he recorded fragments of what he called the Scaled Archives, a vast repository of knowledge stolen from dragons over the centuries. Hermes Mora's interest in draconic knowledge arises from its unique metaphysical properties. Unlike mortal knowledge, which exists as abstract information, dragon knowledge is tied to their very being. When a dragon knows something, that knowledge becomes part of its identity, inseparable from its soul. This integration of knowledge in self makes dragon lore particularly valuable to the Daedric Prince of Knowledge, representing a form of understanding distinct from mortal scholarship. The ways in which Hermes Mora acquires this knowledge reveal much about both his nature and the vulnerabilities of dragons. According to records in the Uranium, Hermes Mora uses three main methods. First, he offers tempting knowledge to dragons in exchange for secrets, a strategy that's rarely successful, but effective with younger or curious dragons. Second, he harvests knowledge from slain dragons whose souls weren't absorbed by a dragonborn, tapping into the residual memories left in their remains. Third, and most insidiously. He forms symbiotic relationships with living dragons, extracting their knowledge while offering forbidden secrets from other realms. This last method was especially effective with Duravir, the ancient dragon imprisoned in the Soul Cairn. Isolated and desperate for stimulation, Duravir became receptive to Hermes Mora's offers. Through this bond, Hermes Mora gained extensive knowledge of necromantic applications of the voice, which he later incorporated into experiments concerning mortality and resurrection. The physical manifestation of dragon knowledge within Apocrypha differs from other types of information, where most knowledge appears as books or scrolls. Dragon knowledge retains a semi-organic quality. Visitors describe seeing fragments of draconic essence, scales, claws, or even entire skeletal structures that transmit knowledge directly to the mind. This bypasses conventional reading, instead imposing understanding in a way that feels like memories not originally yours unfolding in your thoughts. The black books discovered in Solstheim represent the most accessible link between mortals and Hermes Mora's dragon archives. These artifacts, though primarily associated with the general knowledge collection, contain subtle references to dragon lore. Examining the black book, Waking Dreams, reveals marginal notes in a script unlike any known mortal language, but bearing striking similarities to the inscriptions found on word walls throughout Skyrim. The connection between these books and dragon knowledge becomes clear when considering their effects on readers. Unlike typical magical texts that impart knowledge through reading, the black books alter the reader's perception, making the experience similar to absorbing dragon knowledge through a word wall or soul absorption. The specific dragon knowledge in Hermes Mora's collection spans the entire history of dragons. The oldest sections reportedly contain records from the Dawn era, including first-hand accounts of Akatosh's fragmentation and the original split between Alduin and other draconic entities. These primordial records predate mortal civilization, offering a perspective on creation not found elsewhere. More accessible sections contain information about the dragon cult period, including rituals and techniques for drawing power from worshippers. These records provide insight into how dragons maintained control over vast territories during the Merethic era. The most dangerous sections, however, detail specialized applications of the voice unknown to modern practitioners, such as manipulating time locally, binding souls to physical locations, and altering weather patterns across regions. The most guarded section of the Draconic Archives contains information about soul manipulation, specifically the transfer, division, and consumption of dragon souls. This knowledge became the foundation for Muro's rebellion against his dragon masters, enabling him to absorb dragon souls long before the last Dragonborn developed this ability. Muro's relationship with Hermes Mora marked the most significant historical intersection between the Daedric Prince and dragon knowledge. As the first Dragonborn, Muro occupied a unique metaphysical position, blending mortal and draconic characteristics. This dual nature made him particularly valuable to Hermes Mora, who recognized the potential for unprecedented synthesis of knowledge. Their bargain began when Muro served as a dragon priest, and Hermes Mora appeared to him not as his usual form, but as a book containing tantalizing fragments of knowledge about dragons, including the revelation that dragons could to consolidate their power. The dragons promoted certain humans within the cult to positions of influence. These individuals, chosen for their loyalty and magical talent, acted as intermediaries between the dragons and the people. Wearing powerful, distinctive masks, they managed the day-to-day affairs of the cult's territories. Excavations at places like Forhost and Bramjunar have uncovered ritual chambers where these priests would communicate with the dragons and carry out ceremonies, often involving human sacrifices. The dragon cult reached its peak around Me 500, when much of northern Tamriel came under its control. The grand temples built during this time, many of which later became dragon burial sites, showcase the wealth and engineering skills of the ancient Nords. These temples were designed with elements that reflected dragons, such as soaring arches and dragon-shaped faces, and they featured ceremonial spaces built to amplify sound. Life under the dragon cult's rule was one of hard labor and fear. Excavations from this period show evidence of resource extraction, with much of the population's work directed towards supporting the priests and, ultimately, the dragons. Tablets found near Windhelm record punishments for failing to meet tribute requirements, including burning entire families who couldn't provide enough offerings. Despite this harsh rule, the cult maintained stability for centuries through religious indoctrination and the dragon's overwhelming power. Children born under the cult's influence were taught from an early age to view the dragons as divine beings. Surviving texts from common people of this era expressed devotion rather than resentment, suggesting that many accepted their subjugation as the natural order. The theology of the dragon cult distinguished between Alduin and Akatosh, which later became a central issue in religious debates. In the cult's belief system, Alduin was not simply a form of Akatosh but a separate entity. While Akatosh represented time's forward flow and creation, Alduin embodied destruction, entropy, and the inevitable end of the world. This distinction continued even after the Dragon War and the cult's fall. The ancient Nords worshipped Akatosh with caution, while they propitiated Alduin through rituals to delay his world-ending hunger. Imperial influence in the First Era tried to merge Nordic beliefs with their own by equating Alduin with Akatosh, but Nordic religious leaders resisted, emphasizing the differences between the two. By the Third Era, this debate largely faded, but some isolated communities continued to honor the distinction. Prophecies about Alduin's return appear throughout Tamriel's history, though with variations reflecting changing views of his nature. The oldest depictions, from shortly after the Dragon War, show Alduin as a black dragon returning to devour the sun. In the early First Era, the Book of the Dragonborn recorded a more structured prophecy, linking Alduin's return to specific world-changing events, many of which align with later historical events. Some scholars have questioned whether the book was altered over time, but evidence from ancient manuscripts suggests it retains its original form, indicating genuine prophetic insight. The Elder Scrolls themselves provide more direct information about Alduin's banishment and return, though they are difficult to interpret. One scroll, used by Felder the Old to send Alduin forward in time, reveals a temporal link between the moment of his banishment and his return. This connection transcends ordinary cause and effect, suggesting that Alduin's return in 4E 201 was not a coincidence, but the result of a pattern set by the Elder Scroll. Alduin's actions upon his return show a shift in his goals. Instead of immediately consuming the world, he focused on resurrecting his dragon lieutenants, implying that his desire for power remained his primary motivation even after thousands of years. Alduin's relationship with other dragons was one of fear rather than loyalty. Though they recognized him as the firstborn of Akatosh, dragons obeyed him out of fear. The defection of Paarthurnax during the Dragon War shows that dragons had free will and could reject Alduin's authority. This suggests that Alduin's power was based more on coercion than any inherent right to lead his kin. The ruins scattered across Skyrim stand as reminders of a time when dragons ruled and men served. While Alduin was the ultimate authority, the society under him was complex, with a clear hierarchy. At the top were the dragons, with Alduin as their unquestioned leader. Archaeological findings from sites like Skaldafin and Bromjunar show carved stone perches where dragons would position themselves above their subjects during ceremonies. Beneath the dragons, but still above ordinary mortals, were the dragon priests, who not only served as religious leaders, but also as the governing body. The highest-ranking priest wore the mask of Karek, meaning warlord, a symbol of leadership within the cult. Excavations at Labyrinthian suggest that Alduin himself may have overseen the selection of new high priests. Below the principal dragon priests were 8 regional priests who governed the major holds of Skyrim. These priests, known for wearing powerful enchanted masks, helped implement the dragon's will. The creation of these masks was a significant magical achievement, with enchantments that enhanced the wearer's abilities. The masks contained traces of dragon essence, implying the dragons themselves contributed to their creation. One notable exception to the priesthood's hierarchy was Murok, the first dragonborn. He had the ability to absorb dragon souls, which led to his rebellion against Alduin. Murok's betrayal was the first major challenge to Alduin's authority, though it would take thousands of years before the Dragon War truly erupted. Below the principal priests were lower-ranking priests, acolytes, and functionaries, who, while not as powerful as their superiors, still enjoyed privileges that common Nords did not. Evidence from sites like Forhost shows different living conditions for priests based on their rank. Lower-ranking priests lived in simple quarters, while higher-ranking ones enjoyed more luxurious accommodations. The priesthood recruited new members based on merit, selecting individuals with magical talent or loyalty to the dragons. This system helped maintain the cult's power by incorporating the most capable individuals, rather than relying on heredity. Families hoped their children might ascend to the priesthood for the comfort and security it provided. Beneath the priestly class were the warriors, who pledged loyalty to the dragons, forming an elite military caste. This hierarchy was reflected in burial practices, such as those at the Kilkree ruins, where warriors of high rank were interred with distinctive honors. Is this conversation helpful so far? These warriors are trained in combat methods designed to enhance draconic attacks, essentially acting as ground forces for aerial dragon assaults. Their gear usually includes dragon-inspired designs, with helmets shaped like dragon heads and armor engraved with scales. Another elite group consists of artisans who made religious artifacts and maintained temple buildings. Excavations at Bram-Junar have uncovered specialized workshops where craftsmen created items from ceremonial bowls to dragon-clawed door lock components found in ancient Nordic ruins. These craftsmen marked their work with personal runes, suggesting they received individual recognition despite their role in a rigid hierarchy. The majority of the population were common workers, farmers, and servants whose main role was to support the dragon cult. Their lives involved hard labor and strict religious practices. Housing remains from this period indicate cramped living conditions, with multiple families often sharing a single structure. Evidence of diets shows that most relied on grains, with meat and luxury foods being rare, likely only appearing during religious festivals. At the lowest level of society were thralls, prisoners taken from raids or criminals sentenced to servitude. These individuals had few rights and were often assigned the most dangerous or degrading tasks. Archaeological findings suggest that thralls were frequently sacrificed in religious ceremonies, particularly during temple consecrations, or when the dragon cult sought draconic intervention during times of famine or conflict. A key aspect of the dragon cult's practices was the creation of Draugr-preserved bodies reanimated by residual life force to continue serving priests after death. Contrary to popular belief, not all ancient Nords became Draugr. This honor was reserved for those who had been especially devoted to the dragon cult in life. The process of creating Draugr is not fully understood, but seems to have involved both alchemical preservation and magical rituals. Analysis of Draugr found in ruins shows a continuation of social hierarchy even after death, with common Draugr dressed in simple burial clothes and wielding basic weapons. while those of higher status retained more elaborate armor and more powerful weapons. The most powerful Draugr, usually former priests or high-ranking warriors, maintained magical abilities and greater awareness, suggesting more intricate preservation methods for those of higher social standing. The dragon cult's architectural legacy remains one of its most visible contributions to Nordic culture. The large stone complexes that housed dragons and their priests featured distinctive angular designs, soaring arches, and abundant symbolic imagery. These structures were not just functional. They physically represented draconic philosophy. Verticality was a key theme in dragon cult architecture, with temples and ceremonial spaces featuring high ceilings and platforms at various elevations. Dragons occupied the highest platforms, priests were placed on intermediate levels, and common worshippers were at ground level, constantly reminded of the powers above them. The word walls, found throughout Skyrim, represent one of the most significant intersections of architecture and language in the dragon cult. These curved stone structures, inscribed with dragon script, served multiple purpose, preserving important events, asserting draconic superiority, and containing words of power that could be absorbed by those with the right abilities. The dragon language had a profound influence on ancient Nordic society, providing a script for inscriptions and shaping the way authority was exercised. Linguistic analysis shows that different forms of address were used depending on one's rank, with elaborate honorifics required when speaking to higher status individuals. Dragon cult magic also differed from later Nordic magical traditions. While post-Dragon War Nordic magic was focused on combat, dragon cult magic emphasized control, preservation, and fire. Enchanted items from this period typically granted control over others, protected against decay, or harnessed fire in various ways. The transition from dragon worship to the ancient Nordic pantheon marked one of the most significant cultural changes in Tamrielic history. Contrary to simplified accounts, this shift did not happen immediately after the Dragon War, nor did it involve a direct adoption of the 8 divines. Instead, the ancient Nords developed an intermediate pantheon that blended their native beliefs with influences from elven religions. The earliest religious sites after the Dragon War, such as the ruins at Giukar's monument, show worship of animal totems rather than human-like gods. The bear, fox, wolf, moth, owl, whale, snake, and eagle became significant spiritual symbols, each linked to specific virtues or natural forces. These totems gradually evolved into more defined deities, leading to the gods of the ancient Nordic pantheon, including Shor, Kine, Stun, Sun, Mara, Dibella, Orsi, and Alduin. The god of destruction, Alduin remained part of the pantheon even after the dragon cult's downfall, though his role shifted from an object of worship to a feared entity requiring appeasement. Archaeological evidence shows that the transition from dragon worship to the Nordic pantheon took time. The oldest Nordic ruins, such as Unalbero near Windhelm, contain burial chambers with mixed religious symbols. Dragon motifs appear alongside those of bears and eagles, indicating a period of fluid religious beliefs. By the early First Era, however, sites like Falunthur show exclusively totemic imagery, signifying that the shift away from dragon worship had become firmly established. Even in the Fourth Era, the physical remains of the dragon cult continue to have influence. Dragon priest masks, in particular, are highly sought after for their remarkable magical properties, which have endured despite the passage of thousands of years. These masks, along with ceremonial items like sacrificial daggers, incense burners, and amulets designed to protect servants from dragon fire, demonstrate the combination of fine craftsmanship and magical knowledge within the dragon cult. The collapse of the dragon cult following the Dragon War left a power vacuum in Nordic society, which various groups sought to fill. The warrior class, led by those who had mastered the voice, established the first true Nordic kingdom around Windhelm. This transition from theocratic to martial leadership established a pattern that would shape Nordic society for centuries, emphasizing personal strength and leadership over divine or inherited authority. The seeds of rebellion against the dragon cult's tyranny grew slowly over time, reaching a peak during the late Martha era when oppression had reached extreme levels. Whole villages were sacrificed to appease the dragons. What began as isolated acts of resistance eventually coalesced into the greatest uprising in ancient Nordic history. The first resistance came from isolated mountain communities in the Pale, where Nords secretly worshipped kine rather than the dragons. Archaeological evidence from places like Clearpen Pond shows hidden shrines with hawk imagery, kine's sacred animal, concealed within dragon effigies, symbolizing the quiet rejection of draconic rule. The real turning point, however, came from an unexpected source. Parthenax, one of Alduin's trusted lieutenants. After witnessing a massacre of a settlement that failed to pay tribute, Parthenax began questioning the righteousness of the dragon's rule. His defection to the side of mortals sparked a theological crisis in the dragon cult, raising doubts about Alduin's divine right to rule. Though the priesthood tried to suppress knowledge of his betrayal, rumors spread, fueling resistance movements. The decisive moment in the rebellion came when Keen intervened directly in mortal affairs, instructing Parthenax to teach humans the power of the voice. This divine gift would allow mortals to fight dragons on more equal terms, using the dragon's own power against them. The first mortals to learn the voice were individuals carefully chosen for their aptitude and moral character. Among them were Felder the Old, Gormlath Goldenhilt, and Hack in One Eye, three legendary figures whose names would be forever associated with the Dragon War. These fighters undergo specialized training in combat techniques designed to complement dragon attacks, effectively serving as ground support for airborne dragon offensives. Their gear often includes dragon-themed designs, such as helmets shaped like dragon heads and armor engraved with scales. Another privileged class consisted of artisans responsible for crafting religious artifacts and maintaining temple structures. Discoveries at Bramjunar reveal workshops where these craftsmen produced ceremonial items and components for the Dragonclaw door locks found in ancient Nordic ruins. These artisans often marked their creations with personal runes, suggesting they received individual recognition within a rigid hierarchy. Most of the population were common laborers, farmers, and servants tasked with providing resources for the dragon cult. Their lives involved arduous work and strict religious observance. Housing remains from the period show overcrowded conditions, with multiple families often sharing a single dwelling. Dietary evidence indicates a basic diet of grains, with meat and other luxuries reserved for special occasions like religious festivals. At the bottom of society were thralls captives from raids or criminals sentenced to servitude. Thralls had few rights and performed the most dangerous or degrading tasks. Archaeological findings suggest they were often sacrificed during religious ceremonies, particularly for temple consecrations or appeals for dragon intervention in times of crisis. The dragon cult's burial practices were unique, involving the creation of drog-preserved corpses animated to serve even in death. Contrary to popular belief, not all Nords became Draugr. This status was reserved for those who demonstrated exceptional devotion to the cult. The process of creating Draugr remains unclear, but involved both alchemical preservation and magical rituals. Examination of Draugr reveals that social hierarchies were maintained even in death, with higher-ranked individuals retaining elaborate armor and weapons, while common Draugr had simpler gear. High-ranking Draugr often exhibited significant magical abilities suggesting a more complex preservation process for important individuals. The dragon cult's architectural legacy is one of its most enduring contributions to Nordic culture. The massive stone complexes that housed dragons and priests featured angular designs, towering arches, and symbolic imagery. These structures served as physical expressions of draconic philosophy, emphasizing verticality. Dragons occupied the highest platforms, priests the intermediate levels, and worshippers the ground level, reinforcing the hierarchical structure of the cult. The word walls, found throughout Skyrim, inscribed with dragon script, served as both historical records and magical amplifiers. When dragon speech resonated nearby, the dragon language influenced ancient Nordic society by shaping authority dynamics. Linguistic analysis shows that speech patterns and honorifics varied by social rank. Dragon cult magic focused on domination, preservation, and fire, contrasting with the more combat-oriented magic of post-Dragon War Nordic traditions. Enchanted artifacts from the period demonstrated advanced craftsmanship and magical knowledge, combining practical use with symbolic power. The transition from dragon worship to the ancient Nordic pantheon marked a significant cultural shift. This change did not happen immediately after the Dragon War, but evolved through intermediate religious practices influenced by native and elven traditions. Early post-war sites, such as Jukar's monument, reveal worship of animal totems like the bear, fox, and eagle, which later developed into the gods of the ancient Nordic pantheon. The decline of the dragon cult created a power vacuum, leading to the rise of a warrior-led society centered on Windhelm. The rebellion against the cult, sparked by the growing oppression and the defection of the dragon Parthernax, culminated in the Dragon War. Parthernax taught humans the voice, empowering them to resist the dragons. Key figures in the rebellion, such as Feldir the Old, Gormlaith Goldenhilt, and Hakon One-Eye, played pivotal roles in this transformative conflict, shaping the future of Nordic culture and governance. Hrothgar had not yet been founded as a monastery, but the Throat of the World already held spiritual significance for the ancient Nords. In caves near its peak, Parthernax taught the first words of power to his human students. Mastering the thumb was not just about memorizing words in the dragon language. It required an understanding of the concepts behind each word and an internalization of their meaning. For dragons, this understanding was inherent due to their connection to Akatosh. For mortals, however, it required years of meditation and practice to master even a single word. The first word taught to human rebels was Fus, force, chosen for its defensive power. By projecting a wave of kinetic energy, the early tongues could create space between themselves and attacking dragons, allowing them time to regroup. This choice reflected Parthernax's belief in using the voice for protection rather than domination. As the rebellion grew, the tongues developed more advanced battle strategies. Dragons, once free to attack from above without fear, now found themselves vulnerable to coordinated attacks. A typical fight would start with one group using the voice to force a dragon to land, while others would strike with conventional weapons aimed at vulnerable spots such as the wings, eyes, and underbelly. The first major victory for the rebels occurred at Dragontooth Crater, located west of Whiterun. According to the Chronicle of Clan Frostheart, 3 dragons were ambushed by 20 tongues and nearly 100 conventional warriors. The battle lasted from dawn until noon, with all 3 dragons killed without losing a single tongue. This victory galvanized the rebellion, drawing thousands of new recruits to the cause. The dragon cult responded quickly and harshly, executing entire communities suspected of aiding the rebels. These purges were intended to terrify the population, but instead fueled further resentment. With each atrocity, more Nords joined the fight, seeing the rebellion as their only hope for survival. Both sides adapted and refined their strategies. The rebels set up a network of signal fires across Skyrim's mountains to quickly share information about dragon movements and coordinate regional forces. In response, the dragon cult formed specialized units trained to eliminate the tongues before they could use the voice. These silent seekers carried poisoned weapons to paralyze the vocal cords, rendering the thumb temporarily useless. Technological innovations played a critical role in the rebellion's success, often overshadowed by the magical aspects of the war. The ancient Nords developed specialized weapons for fighting dragons, such as harpoons attached to ropes to ground-flying dragons, and shields reinforced with a central spike to resist dragon fire. Perhaps the most significant advancement was the creation of dragon-rend arrows, designed to penetrate the spaces between a dragon's scales. These arrows, with their spiral fletching, improved accuracy against moving aerial targets. They were crafted using a combination of bone, sinew, and specially treated wood for durability and power. The war reached its peak about 7 years after the first organized resistance, when the rebels launched a simultaneous attack on multiple dragon strongholds. This forced Alduin to personally intervene as his commanders were overwhelmed by the increasingly well-organized human forces. The final confrontation occurred at the throat of the world, where Felder, Gormlith, and Hakon directly faced Alduin. The battle, recorded in the Time Wound itself, was both physically and metaphysically significant. The three heroes began their assault with a coordinated shout, which modern scholars believe was the Dragon-Rend shout, specifically designed to force dragons to confront their mortality. This temporarily grounded Alduin, allowing the heroes to strike with conventional weapons. Gormlith's blade drew first blood, followed by Hakon's axe, targeting Alduin's wing joints, while Felder combined destruction magic with the thumb to disorient him. Despite their initial success, the heroes soon realized that conventional tactics wouldn't be enough to defeat Alduin. His wounds healed almost as fast as they were inflicted, and his retaliatory attacks grew stronger. Gormlith was the first to fall, consumed by Alduin's fire after landing a heavy blow to his eye. With their numbers dwindling, Felder made the critical decision to use the Elder Scroll he had brought as a last resort. While Hakon kept fighting Alduin, Felder began reading the scroll's incomprehensible text. The resulting time distortion tore Alduin from the mortal era, casting him forward in time and creating the time wound that would remain at the throat of the world for millennia. Following Alduin's banishment, the impact on Nordic society was swift. Without their leader, many dragons retreated to isolated lairs or fled Skyrim entirely. Those who remained were hunted relentlessly by the emboldened tongues. Dragon priests, stripped of their supernatural protection, were overthrown or forced into hiding, often taking refuge in elaborate tombs designed for their eventual remains. The victorious rebels now faced the daunting task of rebuilding Nordic society. The dragon cult had controlled every aspect of life for generations, and its absence left a power vacuum. The surviving tongues created a new social order based on martial prowess rather than religious authority. Hakon, the most prominent surviving hero, became the first High King of a unified Skyrim, establishing a tradition where one proved their worth to rule through strength and honor, not divine right. However, not all tongues sought political power. Some, including Felder the Old, recognized the potential danger of using the voice for personal gain. These individuals withdrew from public life and founded what would become the Graveyard Order, dedicated to peacefully studying the thumb to achieve spiritual enlightenment. The split between those who viewed the voice as a weapon and those who saw it as a path to wisdom formalized when Jurgian Windcaller, after meditating for 7 years, established the way of the voice. Jurgyon taught that the thumb should be used primarily for the worship of the gods, rather than for mortal ambitions. His teachings gained widespread support as the immediate threat of dragons diminished, and the memory of the Dragon War faded into legend. Hrothgar was established as a monastery for those following the way of the voice, where they could study in isolation, away from the temptations of power. The Graveyard Order's influence extended far beyond their remote monastery. Their existence served as a reminder of the corrupting potential of power, and their occasional recognition of worthy individuals, such as Tiber Septim, carried great weight in Nordic society. By keeping the most powerful tongues out of politics and warfare, the graveyard tradition helped prevent the rise of voice-wielding tyrants. The legacy of the Dragon War also affected Nordic religious practices. Kin, who had empowered mortals to overthrow their dragon oppressors, became the most revered deity in the Nordic pantheon. Temples dedicated to her sprang up across Skyrim, often built on the ruins of former dragon cult sites. Weapons and armor from fallen heroes became sacred relics, preserved in clan holdings and temples. The tradition of naming weapons and attributing them specific personalities or powers, still common in the Fourth Era, began during this period. The scorched plains of Akavir, a mysterious continent, gave rise to what would eventually become one of Tamriel's most influential organizations. Long before they pledged themselves to dragonborn emperors or built mountaintop fortresses across Cyrodiil and Skyrim, the ancestors of the Blades were known as the Averi Dragon Guard, dedicated to eradicating dragons in their homeland. Archaeological evidence suggests the Dragon Guard's origins date back to the late Merethic era. Fragments of curved swords found in Skyrim beneath Skyhaven Temple bear inscriptions translated as "Death to the Winged Scourge," linking the Dragon Guard to a time when dragons ruled both Skyrim and Akavir. The Akaviri Dragon Guard developed unique techniques for dragon hunting, differing significantly from the Nordic tongues. Hrothgar was not yet recognized as a monastery, but the Throat of the World already held deep spiritual meaning for the ancient Nords. In caves near its peak, Parthnax instructed his first human pupils in the words of power. Learning the thumb involved more than memorizing words in the dragon language. It required an understanding of the concepts behind each word, an internalization beyond just intellectual comprehension. Dragons naturally grasped this connection through their bond with Akatosh, but for mortals, it demanded intense meditation and practice, often taking years to master even a single word. The first word taught to the human rebels was Fus, force, specifically chosen for its defensive capabilities. By projecting waves of kinetic energy, the rebels could create space between themselves and attacking dragons, buying crucial time to organize their strategies. This choice of word reflected Parthnax's focus on using the voice for protection rather than control. As the rebellion gained momentum, the rebels developed more advanced tactics. Dragons, once untouchable in the sky, now found themselves vulnerable to coordinated ground assaults. A typical battle began with one group of rebels using the voice to force a dragon to land, while others attacked with conventional weapons targeting weak spots like wings, eyes, and the underbelly. The first major victory came at Dragontooth Crater, west of Whitetron, where 3 dragons were ambushed by 20 rebels, supported by nearly 100 conventional fighters. The battle lasted from dawn to midday, resulting in the death of all 3 dragons without any rebels falling. This unexpected success energized the rebellion, attracting thousands of new supporters. In response, the dragon cult launched brutal purges of entire communities suspected of harboring rebels, attempting to instill fear. Instead, these actions fueled greater anger, and more Nords joined the fight, viewing the rebellion as their only chance for survival. Both sides adapted their strategies. The rebels set up a network of signal fires across Skyrim's peaks to quickly communicate dragon movements, while the dragon cult created specialized units to target the rebels before they could use the voice, employing poisoned weapons to paralyze vocal cords. The war's technological aspects are often overlooked, but they played a key role. The Nords developed specialized dragon fighting tools, like harpoons attached to ropes for bringing down flying dragons, and reinforced shields with a central spike to withstand dragon fire. The most significant innovation was the creation of dragon-rend arrows projectiles designed to slip between scales rather than pierce them directly, with spiral fletching for improved accuracy against airborne targets. These arrows represented a significant advancement in Nordic archery, showing composite construction for durability and power. After 7 years of organized resistance, the rebels launched a simultaneous offensive against multiple dragon strongholds. This forced Alduin to intervene personally, as his subordinates struggled against the growing rebellion. The decisive battle took place at the throat of the world, where 3 heroes, Felder, Gormlith, and Hakon, confronted Alduin. According to Elder Scrolls, their attack began with a coordinated shout, believed to be the Dragonrend shout, designed to make dragons experience mortality. This shout grounded Alduin, allowing the rebels to attack with conventional weapons. Though they initially succeeded, they soon realized Alduin's healing ability would make conventional methods insufficient. Gormlith fell to Alduin's fire after landing a severe blow to his eye, and Felder, seeing no other option, used the Elder Scroll to create a temporal disruption, pulling Alduin into the future and causing the time wound at the throat of the world. With Alduin banished, many dragons retreated, while the remaining ones were hunted by the rebels. Dragon priests lost their supernatural protection and either went into hiding or were overthrown. The survivors of the rebellion faced the challenge of rebuilding society, as the dragon cult had ruled for generations. The surviving rebels, now called tongues, established a new order based on martial strength rather than religious authority. Hakon, the most prominent surviving hero, became the first High King of a united Skyrim. His reign set a new precedent for Nordic governance, prioritizing strength and honor over divine right. Not all tongues sought political power, however. Some, like Felder the Old, saw the potential for corruption in using the voice for personal gain. These individuals formed the Graveyard Order, dedicated to the peaceful study of the thumb and spiritual enlightenment. The philosophy split between those who saw the voice as a weapon and those who viewed it as a path to wisdom. Jergone Windcaller, after years of meditation, emerged with a new perspective, believing the voice should be used primarily for worship and spiritual growth rather than mortal ambitions. His teachings became the foundation of the Way of the Voice, which gained influence as the dragon threat receded. High Hrothgar eventually became a monastery for those following the Way of the Voice, a place of isolation from the temptations of power. The Graveyard Order's impact on Nordic culture extended beyond their monastery. They served as a reminder of the potential for power to corrupt and played a role in guiding figures like Tiber Septim, whose recognition by the Order carried great weight. The Dragon War's legacy also influenced Nordic religious practices. Kin, the goddess who empowered mortals to defeat dragons, became the most revered deity in the Nordic pantheon, with temples dedicated to her rising throughout Skyrim. The weapons of fallen heroes became sacred relics, and the tradition of naming weapons and attributing them with unique powers began, passing down legendary tales of dragon-slaying blades. The dragon-slaying tradition was also carried forward by the Akaviri, a group that would later become the Blades. Originally known as the Averi Dragon Guard, they had dedicated themselves to hunting dragons in their native Akavir. Evidence suggests they had specialized techniques for dragon hunting, focusing on stealth, strategy, and unique weapons like curved blades designed to slip between dragon scales. The migration of the Dragon Guard to Tamriel in 12,700 marked a significant moment in history as they joined forces with the Dragonborn Emperor, Riemann Cyrodiil. After recognizing Riemann as Dragonborn, they pledged their service to protect him, marking the transformation of the Avery Dragon Guard into the Blades, who would serve as protectors of the Emperor. In their early years, the Blades retained many traits of their Akaviri origins while adapting to their new duties. They continued wearing traditional Akaviri armor made of overlapping plates resembling dragon scale sand, ironic choice given their history with dragons. Their forts built during the First Empire blended Akaviri and Cyrodiilic architecture, standing out from standard imperial designs. The most important of these forts was Cloud Ruler Temple, located in the Jural Mountains north of Bruma. Perched on a natural plateau with wide views of the land, it was built with layered defenses and outer wall, an inner courtyard, and a central temple intended to slow and weaken attackers. The temple's design reflected a deep focus on security and martial discipline. The main hall featured an open hearth, a nod to Akaviri communal customs. Nearly half the fort was used for training, and the highest point was a watchtower, not royal quarters, highlighting the Blades' focus on vigilance, while Cloud Ruler served as their base in Cyrodiil. Another site, Skyhaven Temple in the Reach, held even greater symbolic value. Hidden in the mountains, it housed Alduin's Wall, a massive stone mural completed around 1E 2812. This artwork prophesied Alduin's return and the last Dragonborn's role in stopping him. The wall combined sculpture, inlaid metals, and magical preservation techniques. Akaviri seers claimed the designs came from divine visions, and the wall revealed that they had knowledge of dragon lore even before arriving in Tamriel. It depicted events from the Dragon War, including details about the battle at the throat of the world that were only later recorded by the Nords. This raises questions about early contact between the Akaviri and Nords. Skyhaven Temple's layout was very different from Cloud Ruler's, where rather than focusing on defense, it was designed for reflection and knowledge. Its location inside a cave system offered natural protection and allowed for an open interior. The chamber housing Alduin's Wall had shafts of light that illuminated parts of the mural at specific times, possibly tied to prophetic meanings. During the Riemann Empire, the Blades served as both bodyguards to the Emperor and as a secret intelligence agency. They operated hidden bases across Tamriel, allowing covert movement and information gathering. When the Riemann dynasty fell in 1E 2920, the Blades faced a crisis. Without a Dragonborn Emperor, they could have disbanded, but instead they shifted focus to preserving the concept of the Dragonborn ruler. In this period, they resumed dragon hunting, targeting dragons that had gone into hiding. These missions were highly secret to avoid panic or encourage dragon-worshipping cults. Records show small teams tracked dragons for months before launching precision attacks. They used tactics like poisoned bait and specialized weapons. One notable hunt involved a dragon named Nafali Largus, who allied with a local warlord. The Blades spent years infiltrating the warlord's court, breaking the alliance, and finally ambushing the dragon once it was isolated. The rise of Tiber Septim in the Second Era restored the Blades to power. They served him loyally as he was recognized as Dragonborn. Under his rule, the organization grew, recruited from all provinces, and became more integrated with imperial culture. While they kept some Akaviri traditions like their armor, they adopted training and languages from across Tamriel. In the Third Era, the Blades continued serving the Septim dynasty as protectors and spies. Their fortresses were safe retreats for emperors, with some, like Frostcrag Spire and Skyrim, known only to top officials. During the Oblivion Crisis in 3E433, the Blades showed great bravery protecting Emperor Uriel Septim VII and later Martin Septim, aiding in efforts to stop the Daedric invasion. But with the Septim line ending, they lost their guiding mission. In the early Fourth Era, they tried to keep serving the Emperor, even though there was no longer a Dragonborn ruler, Emperor Titus Mede. I accepted their help at first, but the bond never matched what existed under the Septims. The Great War with the Aldmeri Dominion was disastrous for the Blades. The Thalmor, armed with detailed intelligence, attacked Blades' strongholds. Cloud Ruler Temple fell in 4E175, and its defenders were killed. Under the White Gold Concordat, the Blades were outlawed and hunted with Imperial approval. Survivors went into hiding, giving up their old identities, weapons, and armor. By 4E201, only a few remained. One, Delphine, disguised herself as an innkeeper in Riverwood. Another, Esbern, hid beneath Riften, protecting vital knowledge about Alduin and the last Dragonborn. The return of dragons to Skyrim gave the Blades a chance to reclaim their original purpose. Rediscovering Skyhaven Temple gave them a secure base, and the emergence of a new Dragonborn gave them hope. In a full-circle moment, they returned to their roots as dragon hunters, just like their Akaviri ancestors. Skyhaven Temple, untouched since the First Era, provided an authentic example of early Akaviri design. Instead of dominating the land like imperial buildings, it blended with the natural cave system. Water flowed through the temple via spring-fed channels, combining beauty and practicality. The Book of the Dragonborn, a seemingly minor text, contains a major prophecy. Its final section foretells the return of Alduin and the rise of the last Dragonborn. Unlike many vague prophecies, it outlines clear signs: chaos in the 8 corners of the world, referring to the Imperial Simulacrum, the Brass Tower walking. The early members of the Blades maintained many aspects of their Averai traditions while adapting to their new roles. They continued wearing the traditional Akaviri armor, made up of overlapping plates resembling dragon scales, an ironic tribute to their ancient enemies' natural protection. The fortresses built throughout the First Empire combined Akaviri and Cyrodiilic architectural styles, resulting in structures that were distinct from typical imperial designs. One notable fortress was Cloud Ruler Temple, located in the Gerald Mountains north of Bruma. Positioned on a plateau with expansive views, it exemplified the Blades' approach to security. The fortress had several defensive layers, with an outer wall surrounding an inner courtyard and the main temple building. This design mirrored the Akaviri concept of layered defense, wearing down attackers before they reached the core of the fortress. The design also reflected the Blades' priorities. The central hall featured an open hearth, aligning with the Akaviri tradition of communal gathering, while training areas took up nearly half the structure, emphasizing martial prowess. The highest point of the complex was the watchtower, not the Emperor's quarters, highlighting the Blades' focus on vigilance. Cloud Ruler Temple served as the Blades' headquarters in Cyrodiil, while another fortress, Skyhaven Temple, was of even greater significance. Hidden in the Reach, it housed the sacred Alduin's Wall, a stone mural depicting the prophecy of Alduin's return and the role of the last Dragonborn in defeating him. The wall, completed around 1E2812, was a massive work of art, nearly 30 feet long and 12 feet high, incorporating both relief sculpture and precious metals, along with enchantments to preserve its details. The wall revealed that the Akaviri had knowledge of Nordic dragon lore predating their arrival in Tamriel, raising questions about earlier interactions between the continents. The wall accurately depicted events from the Dragon War, matching Nordic oral traditions that were not written down until centuries later. This suggests the Akaviri either had independent knowledge or worked with Nordic lore keepers when creating the wall. Skyhaven Temple's architecture was different from Cloud Ruler's, as it served a different purpose. While Cloud Ruler was primarily a defensive stronghold, Skyhaven was a repository of knowledge and a place for reflection. Its location in a natural cavern system provided protection, allowing for a more open design. The temple's central chamber, where Alduin's wall stood, had light shafts that illuminated different parts of the wall at specific times, potentially tied to prophetic events. During the height of the Riemann Empire, the blades served both as personal bodyguards to the Emperor and as a vast intelligence network across Tamriel. This dual role marked the organization's evolution from mere warriors to a more sophisticated entity involved in espionage and statecraft. The Blades established safe houses in major cities, facilitating their gathering of intelligence and covert operations. When the Riemann dynasty fell in 1E 2920, the Blades faced a crisis of purpose. With no Dragonborn Emperor to protect, they redefined their mission not as safeguarding the Emperor but preserving the institution of the Dragonborn. During the interregnum, the Blades focused on identifying potential Dragonborn heirs who might restore legitimate imperial rule and return to their original purpose, dragon hunting. These hunts were conducted secretly to avoid public panic or cults seeking to restore dragons to power. Many Blades agents tracked dragons that had gone into hiding after the Dragon War, employing sophisticated tactics, such as using poison to weaken dragons and specialized weapons to penetrate their scales. One notable hunt targeted a dragon named Naphalar, who had allied with a local warlord. The Blades infiltrated the warlord's court, undermining the alliance until Naphalar abandoned the warlord, allowing them to strike. The rise of Tiber Septim in the Second Era brought the Blades back into prominence as protectors of the Emperor. As a Dragonborn, Tiber Septim commanded their unwavering loyalty, and the Blades expanded significantly, building new fortresses and recruiting from all provinces. This broadened composition changed the Blades in subtle ways, integrating them into imperial culture. Training methods evolved to incorporate various martial traditions, and their exclusive use of the Akaviri language gave way to Tamrielic, though some ceremonial phrases remained in the original tongue. During the Third Era, the Blades continued to serve as both protectors and intelligence gatherers for the Septim dynasty. Their fortresses, scattered throughout the empire, served as secure refuges for emperors during times of crisis. The Oblivion Crisis of 3E 433 was the Blades' finest hour, but also marked the beginning of their decline. They fought valiantly to protect Emperor Uriel Septim VII, but after his death, the Blades worked to protect his hidden heir, Martin Septim. However, the end of the Oblivion Crisis also marked the fall of the Septim dynasty, leaving the Blades without a Dragonborn Emperor to serve. The mystical connection between Akatosh and the Septim line seemed broken, forcing the Blades to reconsider their purpose. In the early Fourth Era, the Blades tried to continue their role as protectors of the Emperor, despite the absence of a Dragonborn ruler. Emperor Titus Mede, I welcomed their service, but never achieved the deep loyalty that had defined the Blades' previous relationship with Dragonborn emperors. During the Great War, the Thalmor, possessing detailed intelligence about the Blades' operations, targeted the organization, resulting in the fall of Cloud Ruler Temple in 4E75. The White Gold Concordat, which ended the war, included provisions specifically disbanding the Blades, and members were hunted by Thalmor justiciars. This forced the surviving Blades into hiding, where they adopted new identities and discarded their distinctive armor and weapons. By 4E201, only a few Blades remained in complete secrecy. One of the last acting Blades, Delphine, worked as an innkeeper in Riverwood while monitoring dragon activity in Skyrim. Another, Esbern, a scholar of dragon lore, hid in the depths of Riften, preserving knowledge of Alduin and the last Dragonborn. The return of dragons to Skyrim provided the remaining blades with a chance to fulfill their original mission. The rediscovery of Skyhaven Temple offered them a secure base, and the appearance of a new Dragonborn brought hope for the future. This return to dragon hunting mirrored the Blade's origins as the Averate Dragon Guard. The preservation of Skyhaven Temple, which had remained untouched since the early First Era, allowed scholars a glimpse into authentic Akaviri design principles. The temple's integration with the natural environment was a hallmark of Akaviri architecture, with water features enhancing both utility and beauty. The Book of the Dragonborn, a modest text often overlooked, contains perhaps the most significant prophecy of the Fourth Era. The final passages foretell the arrival of the last Dragonborn during a time of great calamity when Alduin will return to threaten the world. The prophecy outlines specific historical events, including the impersonation of Emperor Uriel Septim VII by Jagar Tharn, the activation of the Numidium, the failure of the Tribunal, the fall of the Septim dynasty, and the Skyrim Civil War. Each event leads to the inevitable return of Alduin and the emergence of the last Dragonborn to confront him. This prophecy's remarkable accuracy suggests a recognition of causality patterns woven into the fabric of time itself. The dragon tongue notably lacks conditional or subjunctive forms. All expressions are presented as certainties, mirroring the draconic worldview that rejects uncertainty or possibility, emphasizing only reality and dominance. This structure enhances the language's ability to influence reality. When a dragon speaks, it doesn't make suggestions or requests, but asserts what is and what must be. The linguistic features of Davazul further amplify its reality-shaping power. The language employs tonal patterns that resonate with the fundamental frequencies of the world. When articulated correctly, these tones create harmonies that temporarily alter local reality, allowing the speaker to impose their will. This principle highlights the significance of volume and intensity, as the physical force of sound amplifies these altering harmonics. Unlike Dwemer tonal manipulation, which used complex machinery to produce precise frequencies, dragons or trained mortals manipulate these harmonics biologically. While the Doomer sought to systematize their tonal techniques, the dragon's method is organic and instinctual. Researchers have noted that certain areas in Skyrim possess unique acoustics that enhance the effects of the TH. For example, the time wound at the throat of the world amplifies vocal projections, which may explain why ancient Nords chose this location for their battle with Alduin. Similar phenomena have been observed at word wall locations, suggesting that the Nords intentionally selected these sites for their resonant qualities. The physical effects of shouting extend beyond magical outcomes. Extended use of the TH causes noticeable physical changes in practitioners. The Greybeards, who dedicate their lives to mastering the voice, develop distinctive, raspy voices and vocal fatigue from the strain on their vocal cords. Post-mortem examinations of practitioners reveal thickened vocal tissue and enlarged lingual structures, physical adaptations to endure the stress of shouting. Dragons, however, do not experience physical strain when shouting, as their bodies are naturally equipped to channel these powerful vocalizations. Mortals, on the other hand, must undergo years of practice to adapt their bodies to withstand the physical toll. This physiological limitation is part of the reason few mortals master multiple shouts, as the toll increases with proficiency. The metaphysical requirements for mastering the TH are just as demanding. To wield a word of power, one must internalize not only its sound but also its conceptual meaning. This internalization process requires deep meditation and reflection, sometimes taking years for one word. For instance, understanding the word fooz involves grasping the concept of force as a fundamental principle of existence, not merely as an abstract idea. Similarly, Yol demands comprehension of fire as a transformative force that pervades the world. The long years of meditation required by the Greybeards show how deeply they immerse themselves in these concepts. The Dragonborn, however, bypasses this lengthy internalization by absorbing dragon souls, which grants them immediate access to the dragon's inherent understanding of the words of power. This ability allows them to master these words quickly, accumulating vast power in a short time. The shouts vary in their effects, with each one demonstrating the voice's potential to manipulate reality. The most fundamental shout, Unrelenting Force, imposes the user's will on the physical world, creating a kinetic wave that displaces objects and creatures. Shouts like Clear Skies and Storm Call manipulate weather patterns, altering atmospheric conditions across vast areas. These are not mere illusions, but actual changes to weather systems. More specialized shouts, like Fire Breath and Frost Breath, temporarily alter the environment to manifest these elements. Animal allegiance creates a temporary bond of loyalty with creatures, bypassing conventional magical control. The most complex shout is Dragonrend, designed by mortals to combat dragons. It works differently from other shouts by imposing concepts alien to draconic nature, like mortality and finitude. By forcing dragons to experience these concepts, Dragonrend disrupts their connection to their immortal essence, grounding them and rendering them vulnerable. This shout highlights an innovation in the use of the TH, as it doesn't rely on concepts dragons understand, but rather uses those they cannot comprehend, showcasing a power beyond draconic knowledge. The creation of Dragonrend implies that the TH transcends its origins in dragon language. It suggests that tonal reality manipulation is not limited to dragons, but can be applied through other conceptual understandings, possibly even drawing on uniquely mortal experiences. The philosophy of the Greybeards, following the Dragon War, reflects a different approach to the TH. They view the voice not as a weapon, but as a way to honor the gods through spiritual discipline and meditation. This philosophy arose after the tongue's defeat by Dwarmer and Chimer forces, which the Greybeards interpreted as divine punishment for misusing the power. The monastery at High Hrothgar embodies this philosophy, emphasizing simplicity, isolation, and contemplation. The Greybeards spend long hours in silent meditation, focusing on a single word of power to deepen their understanding. Their discipline extends to all aspects of life, including communication, which is mostly through hand gestures, to avoid unintended applications of their power. This meditative approach contrasts sharply with the martial use of the TH, practiced by the ancient tongues and the Dragonborn. While the Greybeards seek understanding for its own sake, martial practitioners use the voice primarily as a tool for achieving specific goals, often in combat or politics. This philosophical divide creates tension, with each side criticizing the other for either recklessness or self-imposed limitations. The Greybeards justify their approach by citing the inherent nature of the TH. The dragon language, they argue, was created for domination. An unrestricted use of the voice inevitably leads to tyranny. Their philosophy holds that focusing on worship and meditation avoids the corrupting influence of power. Martial practitioners, however, argue that the voice's morality depends on the user's intent, pointing to the Dragonborn's ability to wield the power for good, such as saving the world from Alduin. This debate reflects broader tensions in Nordic culture between active, direct action and contemplative restraint. Traditional Nord values, emphasizing personal honor and strength, align more with the martial use of the th. In contrast, the Greybeard's approach represents power expressed through discipline rather than domination. The Dragonborn, uniquely straddling both mortal and draconic worlds, embodies the tension between restraint and domination. Their choices in using the voice carry significant philosophical implications, potentially shaping future generations' understanding of its proper use. The physical demands of learning the th differ greatly between ordinary mortals and those with draconic heritage. For humans or elves, the process begins with strengthening the diaphragm and vocal cords through breathing exercises. Initiates at High Hrothgar spend their first year learning to project their voices with enough force to create minor disturbances, like rippling tapestries or stirring dust. In addition to physical conditioning, the successful use of the th requires mental discipline. Practitioners must focus on the meaning of each word while controlling their breath and vocal projection. This combination of physical and mental demands explains why so few mortals master even a single shout. The Greybeards employ various techniques to help initiates develop both physical and mental skills. One common exercise involves synchronizing breath with the flicker of a candle flame, while another requires projecting one's voice against Skyrim's harsh mountain winds. These practices prepare the body and mind to channel the power of the voice. For Dragonborn, the physical demands are reduced due to their innate connection to the dragon language, though even they benefit from training in breath control and vocal projection. The dragon language notably lacks conditional or subjunctive forms. All statements are made as absolutes, reflecting the draconic view, which does not recognize possibility or uncertainty, but only reality and dominance. This structure emphasizes the language's ability to shape reality. When a dragon speaks, it doesn't ask or suggest, but declares what is and what must be. Additionally, the phonological aspects of the dragon language enhance its ability to alter reality. Specific tonal patterns in the language resonate with the underlying frequencies of the world. When these tones are properly spoken, they produce harmonics that temporarily alter local reality, enabling the speaker to impose their will on the world. This is why volume and force are essential in this practice. The physical projection of sound amplifies these harmonics. This method differs from the Dwemer approach to tonal architecture, which relied on mechanical devices to create precise frequencies. In contrast, the dragon language achieves similar effects biologically, through the dragon's vocal apparatus, or through trained humans. While the Dwemer system was mechanical, the dragon language remains organic and intuitive. Research has shown that certain locations in Skyrim enhance the effects of the dragon language due to their unique acoustic properties. For example, the time wound at the throat of the world amplifies vocal projections, possibly explaining why the ancient Nords chose it for their final battle with Alduin. Similar phenomena have been observed at various word wall sites, indicating that the Nords deliberately selected locations with these acoustic features for their monuments. The physical effects of using the language extend beyond magical results. Those who practice it over time experience significant physical changes, such as vocal raspiness and fatigue due to the strain on their vocal cords. Studies of deceased users show thickened vocal tissues and enlarged structures, adaptations to handle the demands of speaking in this way. This is a notable difference between dragons and mortals. Dragons don't suffer physical strain, as their bodies are naturally adapted for such vocalizations, while mortals must train for years to withstand the strain of projecting powerful words. This physical limitation also explains why few mortals master multiple shouts, as the strain becomes greater with each additional power mastered. Mastering the language also requires significant metaphysical understanding. To truly use a word of power, one must internalize its sound and its conceptual meaning. The process of absorbing this essence can take years. For instance, understanding the word fooz requires recognizing force as a fundamental principle of reality, not just an abstract concept. Similarly, yol requires understanding fire as a force of transformation and consumption. This deep understanding is why monks spend decades meditating. For a dragonborn, this process is accelerated through absorbing dragon souls, which grant them instant access to the dragon's innate understanding of words of power. This allows them to master in moments what might take others decades, explaining their rapid accumulation of power. The shouts themselves vary in effects, showcasing the wide applications of tonal reality manipulation. The most basic shout, unrelenting force, demonstrates how the speaker can impose their will on physical reality. It doesn't just push objects away, but temporarily alters their physical properties. Weather manipulating shouts like clear skies and storm call show how the language can affect natural systems on a large scale, altering weather patterns across vast areas. Other specialized shouts, such as fire breath and frost breath, do more than project elemental energies. They temporarily transform the environment to produce these elements. Similarly, the animal allegiance shout doesn't control creatures through conventional magic, but alters their conceptual relationship to the speaker, creating temporary loyalty. The most complex shout, Dragon Rend, was created by mortals specifically to combat dragons. It forces dragons to experience concepts alien to immortality and finitude, temporarily disconnecting them from their immortal essence and making them vulnerable. The creation of Dragon Rend demonstrates that the language's power goes beyond draconic knowledge, allowing mortals to project concepts that dragons themselves cannot comprehend. This suggests that tonal manipulation is not just a tool for channeling draconic knowledge, but also for creating effects that contradict it. This has profound philosophical implications, as it suggests that tonal manipulation exists beyond dragons, with mortals potentially exploring unique applications of the language based on their experiences. The Way of the Voice, as taught by the Greybeards, represents a unique approach to the language that emerged after the Dragon War. Founded by Jurgyon Windcaller, this philosophy views the voice not as a weapon, but as a means to honor the gods through meditation and spiritual discipline. After the defeat of the tongues by Dwemer and Khymer forces, Jurgyon saw the misuse of the language as a divine punishment, leading to the creation of a philosophy focused on restraint and reflection. The Greybeards Monastery at High Hrothgar embodies this philosophy, emphasizing isolation and simplicity. Daily practices at the monastery include hours of silent meditation focused on understanding a single word of power. Even when speech is necessary, it is controlled to avoid unintentional effects. This approach contrasts with the martial use of the language practiced by the ancient tongues and later by the Dragonborn, who used the power to achieve specific goals like combat or political advantage. The Greybeards believe that unrestricted use of the language inevitably leads to domination and tyranny, while martial practitioners argue that the language is a tool whose moral implications depend on the user's intentions. The Dragonborn represents a unique position in this philosophical debate. As both mortal and dragon-blooded, they embody the tension between restraint and domination. Their use of the language can either follow the Greybeard philosophy or be directed toward martial goals, influencing future generations' understanding of the language's proper use. The physiological demands of learning the language are different for ordinary mortals and those with draconic heritage. For humans or elves, The process starts with developing specialized breathing techniques to strengthen the diaphragm and vocal cords. New initiates at High Hrothgar often spend their first year learning to project their voices forcefully before attempting to use words of power. Successful use of the language also requires exceptional mental discipline, as practitioners must maintain perfect focus on the meaning of each word while controlling their breath and vocal projection. This explains why so few mortals master even a single shout, let alone multiple ones. The Greybeards teach initiates using various methods, such as meditating before a candle flame or projecting their voice against the mountain winds. These techniques develop both physical and mental capacity to channel the voice's power. For Dragonborn, these requirements are lessened due to their inherent connection to the language. Even so, training in breath control and vocal projection still benefits them, as shown by the last Dragonborn's improvement after formal training. The influence of the voice extends well beyond those who actively use it. In Nordic culture, the idea of voice has impacted everything from religious practices to architecture. Traditional Nordic buildings often have excellent acoustics, with halls designed to carry the voice of important figures, like the king, throughout the space. This subtly honors the power of speech. Religious rituals often include rhythmic chanting, which, although not as powerful as true voice techniques, preserves the cultural memory of voice as a divine connection. In the Fourth Era, practical knowledge of the voice is incredibly rare. Apart from ancient burial grounds, only a few people have a basic understanding of how to use it. However, the cultural memory of its importance persists, especially in the eastern regions where old traditions remain strong. In places like Winterhold and Eastark, parents still tell stories of the tongues who overthrew dragons, keeping alive the idea that language was once the most powerful weapon for the Nords. The return of dragons to Skyrim in 4E20 sparked renewed interest in the thumb among Nordic scholars and warriors. While few can learn the voice using traditional methods, many sought to understand its principles and history. This scholarly focus, combined with dramatic demonstrations of the voice by dragons and the last Dragonborn, ensured that the knowledge of its significance remained alive, even if only a few could wield its power. The first documented dragon sighting of the Fourth Era occurred near Helgen on the 17th of last seed, 4201. Imperial records mention an unidentified aerial phenomenon shortly before the scheduled execution of Stormcloak prisoners. What began as a mere note in a logbook soon marked the start of Skyrim's greatest crisis since the Oblivion Crisis nearly 2 centuries earlier. Helgen was nearly destroyed in the attack, with Imperial reports indicating casualties exceeding 80% of the town's population. Survivors described a massive black dragon descending from the mountains and unleashing devastating power that demolished stone fortifications within minutes. The attack appeared focused on destroying the town's defensive structures and escape routes. The significance of Helgen as the first site of the attack has been debated. Some researchers suggest that Alduin's emergence from the time wound caused a disturbance that drew him to the nearest concentration of mortal life. Others believe it was a deliberate attack due to Helgen's strategic position near the Pale Pass, a choke point for Imperial forces. The most compelling theory is that Alduin sensed the presence of the last Dragonborn among the prisoners, though this remains speculative. After Helgen's destruction, dragon sightings increased across Skyrim. In Eastark, just 3 days later, a greenish bronze dragon was seen circling volcanic pools north of Windhelm, conducting reconnaissance rather than attacking. 5 days later, the Pale reported its first dragon sighting when Lorius Farm was attacked, though this attack seemed more selective. targeting livestock. 2 weeks after Helgen, the first confirmed dragon attack in Whiterun occurred at the Western Watchtower. This was a pivotal moment in the developing crisis, as it marked the first recorded instance of a dragon being defeated by mortal forces in the Fourth Era. The Whitron Guard, with assistance from the Dragonborn, successfully defended against the dragon. The remains of the dragon, identified as Mermolir, provided the first chance to study dragon physiology in centuries. By the end of Hearthfire, 4E201, all 9 holds had reported at least one dragon sighting, and encounters were becoming increasingly frequent. The College of Winterhold established a dragon monitoring program to track these sightings systematically, revealing a pattern radiating from the throat of the world and concentrated around known dragon burial mounds. The process of dragon resurrection, initiated by Alduin, is one of the most significant metaphysical phenomena of the Fourth Era. Unlike conventional necromancy, Alduin's power restored dragons to their original state, including consciousness, memory, and power. This process operates on principles that transcend mortal understanding of life and death. Observations reveal that Alduin hovers above a burial mound and projects a specialized form of vocal power into the earth, causing the ground to erupt and reconstitute the dragon's body at an incredibly fast rate. This suggests that the dragon's soul remains tethered to its remains, allowing for complete restoration even after death. Dragon burial mounds are most concentrated in the Pale and Winterhold regions, correlating with historical dragon worship centers. Some mounds, however, failed to resurrect the dragons, often showing signs of anti-dragon rituals that may have been performed by early Nord dragon hunters to prevent dragons from returning. The social structure of dragons is also becoming clearer as more specimens are studied. Dragons are not a homogeneous group, with differences in physical characteristics, power, and social rank. The most common dragons encountered during the resurgence were those with elemental affinities, such as fire and frost dragons. These dragons typically established territories around a single peak or lake and were less aggressive. The higher ranks, called elemental adepts, demonstrated more complex behavior and targeted specific resources. At the highest level were ancient dragons, massive individuals with centuries of experience. They did not have fixed territories and could command lesser dragons. Legendary dragons, even rarer than ancient dragons, were the most formidable, exhibiting iridescent scales and the ability to use the voice in unique ways. Alduin himself is not classified among these categories. His black scales and ability to manipulate weather and resurrect other dragons place him outside typical dragon classification. His power is rooted in metaphysical abilities, particularly the resurrection of dragons, making him the most powerful dragon of all. The economic impact of the dragon crisis was immediate. Trade routes became dangerous, with caravans needing expensive mercenaries or longer, safer paths. Agricultural production suffered as dragons targeted livestock, leading to a reduction in food supplies and increased prices. Mining operations were also affected, with smaller facilities being abandoned. The cost of weapons increased, creating challenges for both Imperial and Stormcloak forces. The social response to the crisis varied. In Imperial-controlled regions, the focus was on strengthening defenses, while in Stormcloak-aligned regions, the response was more aggressive, with dedicated dragon-hunting militias forming in places like Windhelm. Rural settlements also adapted, building specialized shelters to protect themselves from the dragon attacks. The influence of the voice extends far beyond those who actively practice it, impacting various aspects of Nordic culture, from religious practices to architectural designs. Traditional Nordic buildings often feature acoustics that amplify the voice of important figures, such as chieftains, across the space. This serves as a quiet tribute to the power of spoken word. Religious ceremonies often incorporate rhythmic chanting, which, though not as potent as true shouts, serves as a cultural reminder of the connection between voice and divine power. By the Fourth Era, practical knowledge of the voice has become exceedingly rare, with only a few individuals beyond the graveyards having even a basic understanding of it. However, the cultural memory of its significance remains, particularly in the eastern regions, where ancient customs are most strongly preserved. In places like Winterhold and Eastark, parents continue to tell children stories about the tongues who once overthrew the dragons, preserving the idea that language was once the Nord's most powerful weapon. The return of dragons to Skyrim in 4E20 sparked renewed interest in the Thumb among both scholars and warriors. While few had the ability or patience to master the voice using traditional methods, many sought to understand its history and principles. This scholarly attention, coupled with the dramatic demonstrations of the voice's power by dragons and the last Dragonborn, ensured that the knowledge of the voice would not be lost, despite the rarity of those who could wield it. The first confirmed dragon sighting of the Fourth Era occurred near Helgen in 4E201, just before the scheduled execution of Stormcloak prisoners. What began as a minor note in the logbooks quickly became the beginning of Skyrim's greatest crisis since the Oblivion Crisis nearly 2 centuries prior. Helgen was nearly destroyed in the attack, with casualties exceeding 80% of its population. Survivors described a massive black dragon descending from the mountains, wreaking havoc on the town's fortifications and targeting escape routes with precision. The destruction of Helgen has sparked significant debate among scholars, with some suggesting that Alduin's return from the Time Wound caused a metaphysical disturbance that led him to the nearest population center, while others propose that Helgen's position near Pale Pass made it a strategic target for Imperial forces. Some researchers even speculate that Alduin might have been drawn to the last Dragonborn, who was among the prisoners. Following this initial assault, dragon sightings became more frequent across Skyrim. The second confirmed sighting was just 3 days later in Eastark, where a greenish bronze dragon was seen circling volcanic pools near Windhelm. Unlike the attack on Helgen, this dragon did not target populated areas but instead focused on aerial reconnaissance before vanishing into the mountains. The third confirmed sighting occurred in the Pale, 5 days after Helgen, when Loria's farm was attacked. Unlike Helgen, the dragon's attack here seemed more focused on livestock than humans. The behavior of these early dragons suggested they were rebuilding strength after a long period of dormancy. The Witron Hold was the site of the first successful dragon kill by mortal forces in the Fourth Era, when the Witron Guard defended against a dragon at the Western Watchtower. This marked a turning point in the crisis, as it was the first confirmed instance of a dragon being defeated. The remains of the dragon, identified as Murmelir, were studied, offering the first detailed examination of dragon physiology in centuries. By the end of Hearthfire, 4E201, all 9 holds had reported at least one confirmed dragon sighting, with the frequency of encounters increasing rapidly. The College of Winterhold began tracking dragon sightings systematically, establishing the first comprehensive dragon monitoring program since the First Era. Their records showed a clear expansion pattern radiating outward from the throat of the world, with a concentration of sightings near known dragon burial mounds. The resurrection of dragons, one of the most significant metaphysical phenomena of the Fourth Era, was vastly different from typical necromancy. Instead of simply reanimating a corpse, Alduin's resurrection power restored dragons to full consciousness, memory, and power. This process occurred rapidly, usually within 30 seconds, and completely reformed the dragon's body from skeleton to muscle and hide. The method of resurrection was unlike any known form of mortal magic, transcending the conventional understanding of life and death, dragons, as fragments of Akatosh, could not truly die. Their souls remained tethered to their bodies unless absorbed by a dragonborn. Alduin's power essentially reversed the temporal decay of the dragon's body, reuniting it with the dragon's soul, preserving its memories and allegiances. The geographical distribution of dragon burial mounds in Skyrim sheds light on ancient dragon territorial patterns. The highest concentration is in the Pale and Winterhold regions, with secondary clusters near the mountains bordering Falkreath and the Reach. These areas correspond to historical accounts of dragon worship centers, indicating that dragons preferred to bury their remains near their most devoted human subjects. The rift, however, contains fewer burial mounds, explaining the lower number of dragon attacks in that region during the initial resurgence. Not all dragon burial mounds yielded successful resurrections. Archaeological evidence reveals that some mounds had been specially prepared with ancient anti-dragon rituals, such as separating key skeletal components or incorporating Dwemer metals designed to disrupt magical energies. These practices suggest that early Nord dragon hunters developed sophisticated methods to ensure dragons stayed dead, even in the absence of a dragonborn to absorb their souls. The complex hierarchy of dragon society became more apparent as more dragons were observed. Rather than a homogeneous group, dragons exhibited distinct physical characteristics, power levels, and social statuses. The most common dragons were those with elemental affinities, such as fire and frost dragons. These common dragons generally established territories around a mountain or lake and rarely ventured far. Above them were the elemental adepts, more powerful dragons with stronger elemental abilities and greater intelligence, like the blood dragon with its crimson scales. At the highest levels were the ancient dragons, massive creatures with centuries of experience. They often commanded lesser dragons and attacked human settlements with sophisticated strategies. The rarest and most formidable dragons were the legendary dragons, which were 20% larger than ancient dragons and had iridescent scales that shifted between gold and purple. Their mastery of the voice was unparalleled, able to unleash multiple forms of elemental destruction in quick succession. Alduin himself stood apart from all other dragons, not only due to his physical power, but also his unique abilities, such as resurrection and control over weather. The economic consequences of the dragon crisis were swift and widespread. Trade routes became dangerous, forcing caravans to hire expensive mercenaries or take longer, safer paths. Agricultural production was disrupted as dragons targeted livestock, resulting in reduced harvests and price increases for essential food items. Mining operations were similarly impacted, with several small facilities being abandoned. The decreased resource extraction led to higher weapon costs at a time when demand was rising. By early 4E2, iron weapon prices had risen by 60%, adding complications for both Imperial and Stormcloak forces. The social response to the dragon crisis varied by region. In the Western Holds, with stronger Imperial influence, the focus was on strengthening defenses and forming dragon-watching patrols. Solitude, for example, improved its walls and trained specialized archers with steel-tipped arrows to penetrate dragon scales. In the Eastern Holds, particularly those sympathetic to the Stormcloaks, more aggressive countermeasures were adopted. Windhelm created a dedicated dragon-hunting militia composed of war veterans, which employed coordinated tactics to defeat dragons. Smaller rural settlements also adapted, building specialized shelters designed to withstand dragon attacks. Is this conversation helpful so far? The dragon holes, which were later referred to by locals, served as emergency shelters during attacks, but they didn't provide any protection for livestock or crops. Some farming communities came together to form defense groups, pooling resources to hire permanent mercenary protection or build more sophisticated shared shelters. The religious aspect of the dragon crisis added a layer of complexity to the social response in Skyrim. Traditional Nord religious leaders, especially priests of kind, viewed the return of the dragons as a test of Nordic resolve, akin to ancient trials. This religious framing helped to rally resistance in certain communities, with local temples becoming centers for organizing defense efforts and offering spiritual support to dragon hunters. The ongoing civil war further complicated the response to the dragon threat. With military resources already stretched thin, neither the Imperial nor Stormcloak forces could defend effectively against the dragons while also keeping up their fight with human enemies. This created security gaps, especially along the contested borders between Imperial and Stormcloak territories, where dragons could attack with minimal resistance. Military leaders on both sides noticed the strategic implications of this situation. Imperial records from this period show growing concern that dragons were inadvertently helping the Stormcloaks by disrupting supply lines and forcing troops to be redeployed away from the front lines. In contrast, Stormcloak communications captured by Imperial intelligence revealed frustration that the dragons were preventing the consolidation of recent territorial gains, particularly in the Pale and parts of Whiterun Hold. By mid-4 E2, reports began to suggest that dragon activity was showing signs of coordination. Witnesses claimed to see dragons communicating with each other at high altitudes, sharing information before splitting up to attack different targets. This suggested a form of leadership among the dragons, with certain individuals directing the actions of others for larger goals. More troubling was evidence that dragons were deliberately targeting infrastructure like bridges, watchtowers, and supply depots rather than civilian areas, indicating they understood human military vulnerabilities. The response to the dragon threat evolved rapidly as knowledge of dragon physiology improved. Early weapons had little effect on fully grown dragons, with regular arrows and even enchanted weapons failing to penetrate their thick scales. Smiths across Skyrim started developing specialized anti-dragon weaponry using rediscovered ancient Nord designs alongside modern metalworking techniques. The most successful innovations came from joint efforts between traditional blacksmiths and mages from the College of Winterhold. By adding specific enchantments to disrupt the dragon's inherent magical nature, these collaborations produced weapons that were far more effective. One notable innovation was the Scalebreaker arrows, which had hardened tips designed to target the small gaps between scales rather than attempting to pierce them. Defensive technology also advanced in response. Observing that dragons often attacked with swooping dives instead of landing for direct combat, engineers in Mararth developed the Dragon Net system, a network of steel cables that could be quickly deployed to protect buildings from aerial strikes. Although expensive and hard to maintain, these systems successfully hindered the dragon's ability to strike high-value targets within city limits. As the crisis wore on, different regions developed unique defensive strategies. Settlements in the Reach incorporated Dwemer-inspired mechanical defenses, while Eastmark communities focused on mobile defense units that could rapidly respond to dragon sightings over large areas. This variety of approaches proved beneficial, as dragons struggled to adapt to a single defensive strategy. The environment of Skyrim itself was deeply affected by dragon activity. Forests in the Pale and Fallwreath Hold showed severe fire damage from repeated dragon attacks, changing the landscape and local ecosystems. More subtly, the hunting patterns of wildlife, like elk and mammoths, were disrupted as these animals altered their migration routes to avoid dragon-infested areas. This created additional problems for communities reliant on hunting and gathering, particularly in the northern holds where agriculture was already difficult. By the time Alduin was defeated, Skyrim had undergone profound physical, social, economic, and strategic transformations. The Dragon Crisis exposed weaknesses in existing power structures while creating opportunities for new forms of cooperation and innovation. Communities that adapted successfully to the Dragon threat became more cohesive and developed stronger leadership, better equipped to handle the ongoing challenges of civil war and economic disruption. Though dragons continued to pose a threat after Alduin's defeat, their resurgence had been broken. Without their leader's resurrection, power, and strategic coordination, remaining dragons reverted to more individualistic and territorial behavior. Some withdrew to remote mountain peaks, avoiding interaction with mortals, while others established tenuous truces with nearby settlements and occasionally communicated with particularly brave or reckless human representatives. The mists that swirl across Sovngarde, the Nordic afterlife, represent more than just atmospheric phenomena. They mark the boundary between mortal life and the honored afterlife. Unlike the vague afterlife beliefs of many other cultures, Sovngarde exists as a real realm within Aetherius, accessible through specific metaphysical paths and governed by clear spiritual principles, which have shaped Nordic burial practices for millennia. In the Nordic cosmology, Sovngarde occupies a unique place. While most mortal souls travel to different afterlife realms based on their beliefs or the claims of specific Daedric princes, Nordic souls deemed worthy follow a separate path. Upon death, these souls travel across what ancient Nordic texts call the Whalebone Bridge, a metaphysical pathway that connects the mortal world to Sovngarde. This journey is not automatic, requiring both worthiness and knowledge, which explains the traditional Nordic death rites, which include whispered instructions to the dying. Upon death, the soul separates from its body, and burial customs reflect this understanding. The body is washed with a mix of snowberry extract and juniper oil, believed to purify the body and ease the soul's departure. The deceased's weapons are arranged beside the body, not merely as grave goods, but as spiritual tools for the journey. Analysis of ancient burial sites shows consistent patterns supporting this cosmological view. Bodies are typically positioned with their heads facing northeast and feet southwest, aligned with what Nordic astronomers believe to be the path to Aetherius. This pattern appears in both the tombs of chieftains and simple graves, indicating a shared understanding of the afterlife's direction. Sovngarde itself defies physical laws while maintaining a distinctly Nordic aesthetic. It appears as a vast valley surrounded by impossibly tall mountains, with a sky constantly displaying auroras, the colors of which some scholars believe reflect the emotional state of the souls within. At the valley's center stands the Hall of Valor, also known as Shor's Hall or Valhalla. This massive structure is perhaps the ultimate expression of Nordic architectural ideals. The exterior features intricate carvings that never decay, depicting battles and honored heroes. The hall seems larger on the inside than its exterior would suggest, with the space extending beyond sight. Those rare individuals who have visited Sovngarde and returned describe it as a hall with endless tables arranged in circles around a central hearth, the ceiling rising so high that it creates its own weather patterns. This vastness serves a spiritual purpose, allowing room for all worthy Nordic souls, both past and future. Sovngarde's architectural design mirrors Nordic burial practices. Burial mounds and tombs often contain miniature versions of the Hall of Valor, symbolic representations to guide the soul on its journey. Some of these tombs, particularly those of important chieftains or heroes, feature soul passages, narrow shafts extending from the burial chamber to the surface, often aligned with celestial positions. These passages were not meant for physical use but symbolize the soul's ascent to Sovngarde. Some of the more elaborate examples, such as those found near Windhelm, have acoustic properties that cause the wind to create sounds, like battle cries or ancient chanting. The administration of Sovngarde is primarily under the god Shor, who is the creator and chief deity of the realm. Unlike many deities, Shor actively participates in the afterlife's operations, although he occasionally withdraws during times of cosmic importance. In his absence, the day-to-day duties fall to Sun, described in Nordic texts as Shor's Shield Thane and the Guardian of the Whalebone Bridge. Sun serves as both gatekeeper and final judge, testing the souls of the deceased to ensure they are worthy of entering Sovngarde. Worthiness is not based on moral purity, but on bravery and martial skill, reflecting the Nordic culture's values, where survival often depended more on courage than conventional morality. Kynereth, though not directly governing Sovngarde, plays an important role as the guide for worthy souls. Ancient texts describe her as a spiritual guide who shows the dying the path to Sovngarde, helping them navigate the mists between worlds. Other lesser Nordic deities also have specific roles within Sovngarde, creating a complex spiritual hierarchy. Life in Sovngarde revolves around a perpetual feast in the Hall of Valor, symbolizing spiritual contentment and camaraderie. The food served in this hall has metaphysical properties, allowing souls to relive their most heroic moments. Combat is central to existence in Sovngarde, though it takes these dragon holes, as they came to be known, offered temporary refuge during attacks, but they didn't provide a solution for protecting livestock or crops. Some farming communities formed defense cooperatives, pooling resources to hire mercenaries for permanent protection or build more complex shared shelters. The religious aspect of the dragon crisis added further complexity to Skyrim's social response. Traditional Nord religious figures, especially priests of the kind, viewed the return of dragons as a test of Nordic resolve, akin to ancient trials. This religious perspective helped rally resistance in some communities, with local temples serving as hubs for organizing defense efforts and offering spiritual support to dragon hunters. The ongoing civil war further complicated responses to the dragon threat. With military resources already stretched,
Nixono
neither
Sound
the
Studio.
Imperial nor Stormcloak forces were able to effectively defend against dragons while maintaining their positions in the civil conflict. This created security gaps, especially along the borders between Imperial and Stormcloak territories, where dragons could operate with little opposition. Military leaders on both sides recognized the strategic implications of this situation. Imperial records from the time show increasing concern that dragons were inadvertently aiding the Stormcloaks by disrupting supply lines and forcing troops to be redeployed. On the other hand, Stormcloak communications captured by Imperial intelligence expressed frustration that dragon attacks were hindering the consolidation of recently captured territories, particularly in the Pale and parts of Whiterun Hold. By mid-4 E2, dragon activity began to show signs of coordination beyond simple territorial behavior. Multiple witnesses reported seeing dragons communicating at high altitudes, seemingly exchanging information before splitting up to attack different targets. This suggested the emergence of a strategic hierarchy, with certain dragons directing the actions of others for larger goals. Most concerning was evidence that dragons were specifically targeting military infrastructure bridges, watchtowers, and supply depots rather than population centers, indicating a sophisticated understanding of human military weaknesses. As knowledge of dragon physiology grew, the technological response to the threat advanced rapidly. Initial weapons proved ineffective against adult dragons, as conventional arrows and even standard enchanted weapons failed to pierce their thick scales. Blacksmiths across Skyrim began experimenting with anti-dragon weapons, drawing on ancient Nord designs and incorporating modern metallurgical advancements. The most successful innovations came from the combined efforts of traditional blacksmiths and mages from the College of Winterhold. By incorporating enchantments that disrupted the dragon's magical nature, these efforts resulted in significantly more effective weapons. One particularly successful innovation was the Scale Breaker arrow, designed with narrow, hardened tips to target the small gaps between a dragon's scales rather than trying to penetrate the scales themselves. Similarly, defensive technologies advanced. Engineers in Mararth, observing that dragons preferred diving attacks rather than landing, developed the first dragon net defense system steel cables that could be quickly deployed between buildings to thwart aerial assaults. Although expensive and difficult to maintain, these systems proved effective in preventing dragons from making targeted strikes within cities. As the crisis wore on, different regions developed unique strategies for dragon defense. In the Reach, settlements incorporated Dwemer, inspired mechanical elements, while Eastmark communities focused on mobile defense units that could rapidly respond to dragon sightings across vast areas. This diversity of strategies proved useful, as dragons couldn't adapt to a single defensive approach. Skyrim's natural environment also changed due to dragon activity. Forests in the Pale and Falkreath Hold suffered extensive fire damage from repeated dragon attacks, creating new clearings and altering local ecosystems. Dragon hunting also disrupted wildlife, with herds of elk and mammoths shifting their migration patterns to avoid dragon-prone areas. These environmental changes posed additional challenges for communities dependent on hunting and gathering, particularly in the northern holds where farming was already difficult. By the time Alduin was defeated, Skyrim's landscape had been transformed, not only physically but also socially, economically, and strategically. The Dragon Crisis exposed weaknesses in existing power structures, but it also created opportunities for new forms of cooperation and innovation. Communities that successfully adapted to the dragon threat often became more cohesive and developed stronger leadership, better positioned to deal with the ongoing challenges of civil war and economic turmoil. After Alduin's defeat, individual dragons continued to be a threat, but the organized dragon resurgence had been broken. Without their leader's resurrection power and coordinating influence, the remaining dragons reverted to more territorial, individualistic behaviors. Some retreated to isolated peaks, minimizing contact with humans, while others maintained uneasy truces with nearby settlements, occasionally communicating with particularly brave or reckless individuals. The mists in Sovngarde represent more than just atmospheric phenomena. They mark the boundary between mortal life and the honored Nordic afterlife. Unlike the afterlife beliefs of many Tamrielic cultures, Sovngarde is a tangible realm within Aetherius, accessible through specific metaphysical pathways, governed by clear spiritual principles that have shaped Nordic burial practices for centuries. Cosmogonically, Sovngarde occupies a unique place in the broader structure. While most souls travel to various afterlife realms depending on their beliefs or affiliations with Daedric princes, Nordic souls deemed worthy follow a distinct journey. Upon death, these souls travel across the Whalebone Bridge, a metaphysical path connecting mortal life to the eternal halls of Sovngarde. This journey is not automatic and requires both worthiness and knowledge, which explains the traditional Nordic death rites that include specific instructions whispered to the dying. Upon death, the soul separates from the body, and Nordic burial customs reflect this transition. The body is washed with a mixture of snowberry extract and juniper oil, substances believed to purify the physical form and ease the soul's departure. The deceased's weapons are arranged next to the body as spiritual tools, not just grave goods, to aid in the journey ahead. Examination of ancient burial sites shows consistent patterns, with bodies often positioned with their heads facing northeast and feet southwest, aligning with what Nordic astronomers identified as the path to Aetherius. This alignment appears in burials ranging from elaborate chieftain tombs to simple graves, example. Baldwin's actions of consuming souls did not simply target individual beings, unlike traditional adversaries. His acts undermined the very core of Nordic afterlife beliefs. By devouring souls that had already entered Svengard, Aldwin violated the fundamental promise of eternal recognition that had long been the foundation of Nordic afterlife customs. The way Aldwin consumed souls has unsettling implications for Nordic views on the afterlife. Instead of merely destroying these souls, Aldwin absorbed their essence, merging their power with his own. This process suggests that souls, even in Svengard, retain specific metaphysical properties that can be manipulated or harvested. More concerning, it implies that entry into Svengard does not guarantee true immortality, but offers a conditional form of spiritual continuity that remains vulnerable to powerful beings. The myth Aldwin created within Svengard served both practical and symbolic purposes in this soul harvesting process. Practically, it confused the souls, preventing them from reaching the Hall of Valor. Symbolically, it represented a corruption of the natural transitional mists that mark the boundary between realms, turning a navigational challenge into an existential trap. This distortion of metaphysical boundaries shows Aldwin as a force of cosmic disruption, not just a powerful enemy. The impact of Aldwin's actions on the cyclical nature of the Kalpasthi great world cycles in Nordic cosmology is significant. Traditional belief held that Aldwin's role was to devour the world at the end of each Kalpa, allowing the next world to begin. His consumption of souls in Sovngarde suggests a more intricate process where the energy of heroic souls might fuel this world-ending function. This link between individual afterlife and cosmic cycles reveals a deeper integration of personal and universal eschatology than previously understood in Nordic theology. Aldwin's invasion of Sovngarde affected Nordic communities in the Fourth Era. Traditional burial practices, already in decline due to imperial influence, faced further doubts, with families questioning whether their honored dead had truly reached eternal reward or were devoured by the World Eater. Some communities modified burial rites to include protective measures such as enchanted grave goods, specialized soul-binding rituals, or new symbols alongside traditional Nordic motifs. The relationship between Sovngarde and other afterlife realms remains poorly understood by scholars. Evidence suggests that while Svengard primarily receives Nordic souls, eligibility is determined by worthiness rather than race. Non-Nordic individuals who die valiantly while embracing Nordic cultural values can also enter Svengard, indicating a metaphysical system based on spiritual alignment rather than strict ethnic lines. This inclusivity mirrors the practical aspects of Nordic culture, which historically incorporated outsiders through adoption and oath-binding. Just as a non-Nord could become functionally Nordic through demonstrated courage and loyalty in life, so too could their soul find a place in the Nordic afterlife. This principle explains the presence of non-Nordic names in some of the earliest skaldic poems describing those in the Hall of Valor. The physical manifestation of the Hall of Valor ties into Nordic burial practices. The central hearth of the hall mirrors the fire pits in Nordic tombs, where ceremonial fires were lit during interment. The long feasting tables in Sovngarde reflect the offering tables found in family crypts, where food and drink were left for the deceased. Even the weapons displayed on Sovngarde's walls correspond to the arms arranged in warrior burials. This architectural similarity had spiritual significance, helping to provide the deceased with familiar features of Sovngarde, easing their journey to the true Hall of Valor. The more elaborate the tomb, the closer it resembled Sovngarde, possibly explaining why high-status individuals received more intricate burial arrangements. These tombs provided souls with more accurate maps to their final destination. The sounds of Sovngarde further reveal aspects of Nordic afterlife theology. Accounts describe layers of overlapping sounds, battle chants, heroic poetry, feast songs, and the clashing of weapons. This constant sonic environment contrasts with the silence of death, creating a realm defined by vibrant expression, rather than the quiet stillness commonly associated with death. This focus on sound connects to the Nordic tradition of oral history and skaldic poetry, suggesting that stories themselves are integral to immortality. Time in Sovngarde differs fundamentally from mortal time. While events progress in a forward direction, the boundaries between eras blur, allowing heroes from different ages to interact freely. This fluidity explains why ancient Nordic texts describe historical figures receiving guidance or warnings from ancestors already in Sovngarde. This permeability of time allows wisdom to flow between the living and the dead, rather than being lost with each passing generation. Sovngarde's existence also had practical effects on Nordic society. The belief that those who died valorously would attain a desirable afterlife encouraged a culture that valued honorable death over dishonorable survival. This belief led to warriors willing to take extraordinary risks, contributing to the fearsome reputation of Nordic fighters. The cosmic significance of Sovngarde within the broader cycle of Kalpic cycles suggests that the Nordic afterlife serves purposes beyond merely rewarding individual valor. The concentration of heroic souls in the Hall of Valor creates a reservoir of martial power, which some esoteric texts claim will be unleashed during the final battle at the end of the world. In this eschatological understanding, each soul admitted to Sovngarde strengthens the forces that will eventually fight alongside Shor against cosmic enemies, including possibly Alduin himself. This connection between individual afterlife and universal fate forms a theological framework where personal choices have cosmic consequences. A warrior who dies honorably not only secures their immortality but contributes to the ultimate preservation of creation. This integration of personal and universal destiny represents one of the most advanced theological developments in Nordic religious thought, creating meaning systems that function on both individual and cosmic scales. Deep in the shifting corridors of Apocrypha, beyond endless shelves of books and scrolls that stretch into the sickly green horizon, lies a section few mortals have seen. Suspended in the air are ancient tomes bound in scales rather than leather, their pages inscribed with substances that shimmer and move. This is the dragon section of Hermes Mora's infinite Libraria collection, so dangerous that even the Daedric Prince of Fate keeps it segregated. This collection was first documented by a failed expedition from the College of Winterhold in the late Third Era, led by Master Wizard Deneth Varus. The team briefly accessed Apocrypha using a modified conjuration ritual. Only Varys returned, his mind shattered by what he had seen. Before his death, he managed to document fragments of what he called the Scaled Archives, a vast store of knowledge stolen directly from dragons over millennia. Hermes Mora's interest in draconic knowledge stems from its unique metaphysical properties. Unlike mortal knowledge, which is abstract, dragon knowledge is inseparable from a dragon's soul. When a dragon knows something, that knowledge becomes part of its identity, making it especially valuable to Hermes Mora, who seeks understanding beyond mortal scholarship. The methods by which Hermes Mora acquires this knowledge reveal much about both his nature and the vulnerabilities of dragons. The Daedric Prince uses 3 approaches, offering tempting knowledge in exchange for secrets, harvesting knowledge from slain dragons whose souls were not absorbed by a dragonborn, and forming symbiotic relationships with living dragons to extract their knowledge. This last method was particularly effective with Duravir, an ancient dragon imprisoned in the soul cairn, who, desperate for stimulation, became receptive to Hermes Mora's overtures. Through this connection, the Daedric prince gained extensive knowledge on necromantic uses of the voice, which he later applied to his experiments with mortality and resurrection. The manifestation of dragon knowledge within Apocrypha differs from other knowledge in the realm. Instead of books or scrolls, dragon knowledge takes on a semi-organic form fragments of essence, scales, claws, or sometimes entire skeletal structures that convey knowledge directly to the observer's mind. This direct transmission bypasses traditional reading, imposing understanding through a process that one survivor described as having memories that aren't yours unfold within your thoughts. The black books found in Solstheim serve as the most accessible interface between mortals and Hermes Mora's draconic archives. These books, while primarily associated with his general knowledge collection, contain subtle references to dragon lore. Analysis of the Black Book Waking Dreams reveals marginalia in a script similar to the inscriptions found on word walls in Skyrim. The connection between these books and dragon knowledge becomes clearer when studying their effects on readers. Unlike typical magical tomes, the Black Books alter perception and consciousness in a way that mirrors absorbing dragon knowledge through a word, wall, or soul absorption, suggesting that Hermes Mora deliberately mimicked draconic knowledge transfer methods when creating these artifacts. The dragon knowledge within Hermes Mora's collection spans all of dragon history on Nirn, from the Dawn Era to more recent times. The oldest sections include first-hand accounts of Akatosh's fragmentation and the original divergence between Alduin and other draconic entities, offering a perspective on creation that no mortal civilization can match. More practically accessible sections include details about the dragon cult period, including never-recorded rituals for drawing power from worshippers and extending draconic influence. Some sections describe techniques for manipulating time, binding souls, and altering weather patterns, some of which may explain persistent weather anomalies in Skyrim. The most guarded section of the Draconic Archives contains information on soul manipulation, specifically the transfer, division, and consumption of dragon souls. This knowledge enabled Muro's rebellion against his dragon masters, granting him the ability to absorb dragon souls millennia before Dragonborn would develop this power. This knowledge is forbidden not out of arbitrary taboo, but because it threatens the very existence of dragons. Muro's relationship with Hermes Mora represents the most significant historical intersection between the Daedric Prince and dragon knowledge. As the first Dragonborn, Muro possessed both a mortal perspective and draconic soul characteristics, making him uniquely valuable to Hermes Mora, who saw the potential for unprecedented knowledge synthesis. Their agreement began when Muro, serving as the early Blades, retained much of their Akaviri heritage as they adjusted to their new role. They continued wearing traditional Akaviri armor, made of overlapping plates resembling dragon scale sand, ironic nod to their former enemies. Their fortresses, built during the First Empire, merged Akaviri design with Cyrodiilic construction, creating distinctive structures unlike typical imperial buildings. The most important of these was Cloud Ruler Temple, built atop a plateau in the Jural Mountains north of Bruma. It was designed with layered defenses, an outer wall, an inner courtyard, and the central temple reflecting the Akaviri strategy of exhausting attackers through multiple barriers. Its design reflected the Blade's priorities: an open central hearth for communal gatherings, extensive training grounds, and a watchtower that stood higher than even the Emperor's quarters, underscoring their constant vigilance. While Cloud Ruler served as their main base, in Cyrodiil, Skyhaven Temple, hidden in the Reach, held even deeper meaning. It housed Alduin's Wall, a massive mural created around 1 E2812 that depicted the prophecy of Alduin's return and the role of the last Dragonborn. The wall, stretching nearly 30 feet long and 12 feet high, was a mix of sculpture, precious metals, and enchantments. Akaviri seers claimed divine visions guided its creation. It showed knowledge of Nordic dragon lore that predated the Akaviri arrival in Tamriel, including detailed scenes from the Dragon Warsome, of which aligned with Nordic oral traditions that weren't written down for centuries. This raises the possibility of earlier contact between the Akaviri and Nords. Skyhaven Temple's architecture differed from Cloud Ruler's Fortisky. It wasn't primarily a fortress, but a sanctuary of knowledge and reflection. Nestled in natural caverns, it was naturally defended and featured an open interior. Its main chamber, housing Alduin's wall, used light shafts to highlight sections of the mural at specific times, which some believe forms a calendar tied to prophecy. During the Roman Empire, the Blades served both as elite bodyguards and as a far-reaching intelligence network. They built safe houses across the empire and operated secretly when necessary. After the Riemann dynasty ended in 1 E2920, the Blades faced a crisis. Without a dragonborn ruler, they could have disbanded but instead shifted focus to preserving the idea of a dragonborn emperor. They hunted for potential dragonborn heirs and returned to their roots, tracking and eliminating dragons in hiding after the Dragon War. These secret missions were often carried out by small groups, using precise tactics like poisoned bait and specially designed weapons. One notable mission involved a dragon named Nafa'alalargus, who allied with a warlord. Rather than attack directly, the Blades infiltrated the warlord's circle, undermined the alliance, and ambushed the dragon once it was isolated, an example of their strategic patience. With the rise of Tiber Septim in the Second Era, the Blades regained prominence. They pledged loyalty to him as Dragonborn and became his trusted agents. They expanded their ranks and built new fortresses across the empire. Though they still honored Akaviri traditions, they adopted imperial customs, blending martial techniques and using Tamrielic for internal communication, though some ceremonial phrases remained in Akaviri. In the Third Era, the Blades continued serving as protectors and spies for the Septim rulers. Their remote fortresses provided secure retreats for emperors. During the Oblivion Crisis in 3E433, they fought to protect Emperor Uriel Septim VII, and later helped guide his heir, Martin Septim. Their heroism during the crisis marked a high point, but also the start of their downfall, as the Septim line ended. Unlike in previous times, there was little hope for a new Dragonborn emperor. In the Fourth Era, the Blades tried to remain relevant under Emperor Titus Mede I, who valued their support initially. However, their bond with the Mede dynasty was weaker. During the Great War with the Aldmeri Dominion, the Blades were targeted by the Thalmor, who had detailed knowledge of their operations. Cloud Ruler Temple fell in 4E175, its defenders killed and its treasures lost. The white gold Concordat that ended the war officially disbanded the Blades. Thalmor agents, with Imperial approval, hunted the survivors. Forced into hiding, the few who remained abandoned their symbols and adopted new identities. By 4E201, only a handful survived. One of them, Delphine, posed as an innkeeper in Riverwood while monitoring dragon activity. Another, Esbern, a dragon lore expert, hid in Riften's sewers. The return of dragons to Skyrim gave them a chance to reclaim their original purpose. Rediscovering Skyhaven Temple gave them a secure base, and the appearance of a new Dragonborn offered renewed hope. This return to dragon hunting brought them full circle, back to their origins as the Akaviri Dragon Guard. Skyhaven Temple, untouched for centuries, preserved authentic Akaviri design. Unlike the continually modified Cloud Ruler Temple, it showed how the Akaviri integrated their buildings with nature. Natural features like caves and water springs were enhanced and incorporated into the architecture. A key prophecy of the Fourth Era appears in the Book of the Dragonborn, a small but important text. Its final passages predict the last Dragonborn's arrival during a time of chaos, when Alduin would return. Unlike vague prophecies, this one lists specific signs: misrule at the 8 corners of the world, the Imperial Simulacrum, the Brass Tower walking in time being reshaped, the activation of Numidium, the fall of the Thrice Blessed, the Tribunal's failure and Red Mountain's eruption, the end of the Dragonborn line, Oblivion Crisis, the fall of the White Tower, Imperial City sacked, the Snow Tower bleeding and kingless, Skyrim Civil War. All these conditions were met, making the prophecy's fulfillment Alduin's return and the rise of the last Dragonborn inevitable. What makes this prophecy remarkable is that it doesn't just predict events. It suggests that these events are woven into the very fabric of time, forming a pattern that leads to a destined outcome. Is this conversation helpful so far? You've reached our limit of messages per hour. Please try again later. Retry. Hunting was restricted to specific areas far from major settlements, and dragons refrained from attacking travelers, even when provoked by minor acts of aggression. The return of dragons forced surviving dragon cults in Skyrim to reassess their traditions. While some abandoned their practices, others shifted their focus to more abstract veneration of draconic concepts, rather than the creatures themselves. The future of the last Dragonborn remained uncertain. Some reports indicated they continued hunting hostile dragons while interacting with Parthenax's followers, while others suggested they withdrew from public life to reflect on the implications of absorbing so many dragon souls. There were even reports of expeditions to distant lands, possibly in search of dragons who had fled Skyrim during the ancient Dragon War. By 4E25, a fragile equilibrium had been established in Skyrim. Dragons no longer posed an existential threat to civilization, though their numbers remained small, stabilized at around 40 to 50 individuals. Their influence on daily life was still significant, but they became just one of many challenges Skyrim faced, alongside civil war, Thalmor intrigue, and economic disruption. The legacy of the Dragon Crisis spread beyond Skyrim, with increased scholarly interest in Nordic dragon lore throughout Tamriel. The Empire, despite evidence of dragons' existence, maintained official skepticism, possibly out of fear of legitimizing Nordic independence. The Aldmeri Dominion debated whether dragons posed a threat or an opportunity, with some factions considering magical control over them, while others favored hunting them to eliminate a potential complication to their plans. As time passed, the philosophical implications of dragons' continued existence became more central to intellectual discourse. These beings, part of the fabric of time and creation, demonstrated that even the most fundamental forces of the universe could change. In this transformed world, dragons were no longer just legendary creatures or immediate threats. They had become complex participants in the ongoing story of Tamriel. They were neither fully integrated nor completely alien, but occupied a unique role as both ancient oppressors and potential allies, representing domination as well as the possibility of philosophical growth. Their continued presence ensured that the world, when the Fifth Era eventually dawned, would be fundamentally different from any that had come before. A world where the children of Akatosh soared across the skies, leaving their mark on a land forever altered by their return.